Authorized police records. Factual video evidence. Raw enforcement. This is Bodycam incident reports.
Step out of the vehicle, now. I smell alcohol and marijuana.
That's false. I haven't been drinking. I do not consent to any search. I'm an attorney.
Yeah? Then you should know better. Turn around. Hands on the hood.
You're violating my constitutional rights.
The dashcam footage was grainy, illuminated only by the harsh strobe of red and blue lights cutting through the darkness of a humid Florida evening. The timestamp read 10:42 p.m. on a Friday. Elena Vance, a 42-year-old senior partner at one of the state's most prestigious corporate law firms, was driving her brand-new Mercedes G-Wagon home from a charity gala. She was still wearing a silk evening gown, her heels resting on the floor mat, her mind unwinding from a night of networking. What happened next would not only dismantle the career of a decorated police sergeant, but would expose a corrupt narcotics unit running a criminal enterprise from behind a badge, costing the county nearly $3.5 million in settlements. Elena Vance was not just a lawyer. She was a force of nature. Graduating top of her class from Yale Law, she had spent the last 15 years dismantling corporate monopolies and defending civil rights cases pro bono. She was known in the courtroom as the Iron Lady of Miami, a woman who could cross-examine a witness with such surgical precision that they would often thank her after she destroyed their credibility. She lived in a gated community in Coral Gables, drove a car worth more than most houses, and had never committed a crime in her life. That Friday night started with triumph. Elena had just raised over $2 million for legal aid clinics in underserved communities. She was driving responsibly, adhering to the speed limit her cruise control set to exactly 45 miles per hour. She was listening to an audiobook, looking forward to getting home to her husband and 2 daughters. Nothing about her driving her vehicle or her demeanor suggested criminal activity. Sergeant Rick Miller, however, saw something different. Miller had been with the force for 22 years. He was the head of the Tactical Interdiction Unit, a specialized team tasked with stopping drug trafficking on the highways. But in reality, Miller was a predator with a badge. He had a reputation for being proactive, a code word in the department for targeting minority drivers in expensive cars under the assumption that their wealth could only be the result of criminal enterprise. Miller had been trailing Elena's black SUV for 3 miles. He ran the plates. The car came back registered to Elena Vance with no warrants and a clean record. But Miller didn't care about the record. He saw a black woman in a $150,000 car leaving a wealthy area driving alone late at night. In his twisted worldview, that was enough. He flipped on his lights. Now here is where the story takes its first terrifying turn. Unlike the neighborhood setting of our previous story, a traffic stop on a dark road is one of the most dangerous situations a citizen can face. There are no neighbors watching. There is no safety in numbers. It is just you, the officer, and the weapon on his hip. Elena pulled over, immediately activating her hazards. She lowered all 4 windows, a standard procedure she taught her clients to increase visibility and reduce officer anxiety. She placed her hands at the 10 and 2 positions on the steering wheel. She did everything right. She did everything to ensure she survived the encounter. Sergeant Miller approached the vehicle on the passenger side, shining a high-intensity flashlight directly into her eyes, blinding her. He didn't ask for her license immediately. He didn't tell her why he pulled her over. "Where are you coming from?" Miller barked, his hand resting ominously near his holster. "I'm coming from a charity event at the Biltmore Hotel," Elena replied, calmly, blinking against the glare. "Officer, may I ask why I've been stopped?" "You were swerving," Miller lied. "Crossed the center line twice back there, and I smell alcohol." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice remained steady. She hadn't had a drop of alcohol in 10 years. She was a designated driver and a fitness enthusiast. She knew immediately that this wasn't a routine stop. This was a fabrication. "Officer, that is impossible," Elena stated clearly. "I have not been drinking, and my lane assist technology prevents the car from drifting. I have a dash cam recording inside this vehicle as well." Miller's demeanor shifted instantly. The mention of a camera usually made officers cautious, but for Miller it was a challenge to his authority. He walked around to the driver's side, his face twisting into a sneer. Get out of the car, he ordered. Officer, for what purpose? Elena asked, keeping her hands on the wheel. If you are issuing a citation, I can wait here. I do not feel safe exiting the vehicle on this dark road. I said get out, Miller screamed, ripping the door open. I smell marijuana now. I have probable cause to search this vehicle. Step out or you're going for a ride. Quick question for everyone watching. Have you ever had an officer change their story mid-stop? First it was alcohol. Now it's marijuana. This shifting justification is a classic sign of a fishing expedition, where an officer is desperately looking for any reason to make an arrest. Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced this, because what Miller does next is criminal. Elena stepped out of the vehicle. She stood 5'9", in her evening gown, maintaining her dignity despite the humidity and the aggression of the man screaming in her face. Turn around, hands on the hood, Miller commanded. Officer, I am consenting to a pat-down for weapons only, Elena announced loudly for the benefit of her own dashcam and Miller's body camera. I do not consent to a search of my vehicle. I am an attorney. You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights. Miller laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. You're a lawyer. Yeah, right, and I'm the Chief Justice. You look like a drug dealer's girlfriend taking his car for a joyride. Spread your legs. He kicked her ankles apart roughly. He patted her down with excessive force, his hands lingering inappropriately. Elena bit her tongue, knowing that any physical reaction would be used to justify a charge of resisting arrest or assault on an officer. You got a lot of attitude for someone holding, Miller sneered. He left her standing by the hood and dove into her car. He began tearing the interior apart. He emptied her purse, a $3,000 designer bag, dumping the contents onto the passenger seat. He opened the glove box, throwing her legal papers and insurance documents onto the floor. He was looking for cash. He was looking for drugs. He was looking for anything to justify his bias. Finding nothing in the front, he popped the trunk. He saw a gym bag. Miller unzipped it and found only workout clothes and a pair of sneakers. Frustrated, he turned back to Elena. Where's the stash? He shouted, shining the light in her face again. I know you people. You don't drive a car like this without moving weight. Tell me where it is and maybe I go easy on you. You people, Elena repeated, her voice ice cold. Officer, I am going to ask for your name and badge number immediately. You are profiling me based on my race and my vehicle. There are no drugs. There is no alcohol. You are conducting an illegal search, Miller snapped. The calm logic of this woman, her refusal to be terrified, her vocabulary, it all infuriated him. He marched over, spun her around, and slammed her chest against the hood of her car. The heat of the engine burned through the thin silk of her dress. You're under arrest, Miller growled, grabbing her wrists and wrenching them behind her back. For what? Elena cried out, the pain shooting up her shoulders. What is the charge? Disorderly conduct, resisting without violence, and, let's say, public intoxication, Miller said, clicking the handcuffs too tight. We'll let the boys at the lab figure out what you're on. Elena closed her eyes. She felt the cold steel biting into her skin. She thought of her children sleeping at home. She thought of the courtroom where she reigned supreme. And now she was being shackled like a violent criminal on the side of the road by a man whose only authority came from the badge he was disgracing. But the universe works in mysterious ways. Just as Miller was shoving Elena toward the back of his patrol car, a second set of headlights appeared around the bend. It was a cruiser from a neighboring jurisdiction, the Highway Patrol. Trooper David Chen had seen the stopped vehicles and the aggressive body language. He pulled up behind Miller's car, activating his amber warning lights. Chen was young, idealistic, and had actually attended a legal seminar Elena had taught at the police academy 2 years prior regarding constitutional law. Chen stepped out, adjusting his hat. Everything okay here, Sergeant? Miller looked annoyed. Just another uncooperative suspect, Chen. DUI. Resisting. Dealing with it. Chen walked closer, his flashlight sweeping over the scene. He saw the Mercedes with its contents strewn about. He saw the woman in the evening gown, her face pressed against the window of Miller's back seat. He shined his light on her face. Chen froze. He recognized her instantly. not just from the seminar, but from the news. This was the woman who had just sued the state regarding prison conditions and won a landmark ruling. "Sarge," Chen said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you know who that is?" "Some loudmouth who thinks she's a lawyer," Miller scoffed, writing on his notepad. "She is a lawyer, Sarge," Chen said urgently. "That's Elena Vance. She's the senior partner at Vance and Roth. She represents the police union in contract negotiations sometimes. She's heavy, Sarge." Miller paused. The pen hovered over the paper. The color drained slightly from his face, but his arrogance pushed back. "I don't care if she's the governor. She was swerving. She smelled like weed." "Did you find any?" Chen asked, looking at the clean interior of the Mercedes. "She probably tossed it," Miller grunted. "Sarge." Chen stepped closer, turning off his body cam for a second, a breach of protocol, but one intended to save Miller from himself. "If you book her on a trumped-up DUI and she blows a 0.0 at the station and there's no drugs, you're going to end your career tonight. Look at her. She's in a gala dress. She's not high." Miller looked back at the woman in his car. Elena was staring right at him. She wasn't crying. She wasn't begging. She was memorizing his face. She was memorizing his name tag. She looked like a predator waiting for the cage to open. Miller felt a drop of sweat roll down his neck. He realized he might have bitten off more than he could chew, but his ego wouldn't let him back down completely. He couldn't just let her go after cuffing her. That would be an admission of guilt. "I'm citing her for the lane violation and reckless driving," Miller muttered. "I'm cutting her a break." "You better get those cuffs off her," Chen advised, stepping back. "And you better pray she doesn't file a complaint." Miller opened the back door. "Get out." Elena swung her legs out. She stood up, waiting for him to unlock the cuffs. She didn't say a word. Miller undid the latches. "I'm letting you off with a warning for the swerving, but you watch your mouth next time you talk to law enforcement." Elena rubbed her wrists. Deep red welts were forming where the metal had dug in. She reached into her car, retrieved her phone, and calmly took a picture of Miller's face, then his badge, then his license plate. "Officer Miller," Elena said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage but crystal clear, "you have just committed kidnapping, false imprisonment, battery, and a deprivation of civil rights under color of law. You did not smell marijuana. You did not see me swerve. You saw a black woman in a luxury car, and you wanted to assert dominance." "Get in your car and go before I change my mind," Miller spat. "I am leaving," Elena said. "But do not think for 1 second that this is over. You have just made the biggest mistake of your life." She got into her car. She didn't speed away. She signaled, checked her blind spot, and merged onto the road at exactly the speed limit. As soon as she was out of sight, Elena pulled into a gas station parking lot. She broke down. The tears she had held back came flooding out. She shook uncontrollably, the adrenaline crash hitting her like a freight train. But the breakdown lasted exactly 5 minutes. Then the lawyer took over. She drove straight to the nearest hospital. She requested a full toxicology screening blood and urine to prove legally that she had 0 alcohol or drugs in her system at the time of the stop. She had the doctors photograph the bruising on her wrists and the contusion on her chest where she was slammed against the hood. She created a documented chain of evidence before Miller could even file his report. By Monday morning, Elena Vance wasn't just a victim. She was the prosecution. She filed a lawsuit in federal court. But she didn't just sue Miller, she sued the entire department. She utilized her firm's resources to launch a private investigation into Sergeant Miller's history, and what she found was a horror story hidden in plain sight. This is where the story gets even more insane. Elena's investigators requested public records for every traffic stop Miller had made in the last 5 years. They found a pattern so distinct it had a shape. Miller patrolled a specific 10-mile stretch of highway known as the Corridor. His stops were almost exclusively expensive cars, BMWs, Mercedes Land Rovers, but the data showed something chilling. 90% of the drivers he stopped were African American or Latino. In almost every case, the probable cause was swerving or smell of marijuana. And in 60% of those cases, he conducted a search. But here is the smoking gun. Elena found that in dozens of cases where cash was found, Miller seized the money under civil asset forfeiture laws, claiming the money was drug-related even if no drugs were found. He would take the cash but not charge the driver, effectively telling them, "I'll keep the money and you stay out of jail." It was highway robbery with a badge. Elena realized she wasn't just fighting a racist cop. She was fighting a revenue stream for the department. The department loved Miller because he brought in cash that they used to buy equipment and pay overtime. Elena's team tracked down other victims. They found Dr. Marcus Hill, a neurosurgeon who had been handcuffed on the side of the road while Miller tore apart his Audi. They found Sonia Rodriguez, a grandmother whose life savings were seized because she was carrying cash to buy a used car for her grandson. They all had the same story. Miller was aggressive, abusive, and terrifying. But Miller had made a fatal error with Elena. He forgot about the dash cam. During the discovery phase of the lawsuit, the police department claimed that Miller's body camera had malfunctioned during the arrest and that the dash cam footage was corrupted. It was a classic cover-up. They thought that without the video, it would be his word against hers. But Elena had the footage from her car. The video from her Mercedes was high-definition 4K audio and video. It captured everything. It captured her perfect driving. It captured Miller's aggressive approach. It captured the lie about the smell of marijuana. But most damning of all, it captured the conversation between Miller and Trooper Chen. The audio picked up Miller saying, "You people," and later, "She looks like a drug dealer's girlfriend." When Elena played this tape during the deposition, the room went silent. The city attorneys looked at the floor. Sergeant Miller, sitting across the table, turned a shade of pale that looked almost gray. "Sergeant Miller," Elena said, staring him down across the mahogany table, "can you explain to me why you assumed a senior partner at a law firm was a drug dealer's girlfriend? Was it the car, or was it the color of my skin?" Miller stammered. He tried to claim he was just doing his job. "And the smell of marijuana," Elena pressed. "I have a toxicology report from 45 minutes after the stop showing 0 traces of any substance. I have a clean car. Where was the smell coming from, Sergeant? Or did you imagine it to bypass the Fourth Amendment?" Miller pleading the Fifth Amendment in a civil deposition is something you rarely see, but that is exactly what happened. He refused to answer to avoid incriminating himself. But Elena wasn't done. She went after the chain of command. She deposed the chief of police, exposing emails where Miller bragged about his seizure numbers, and the chief congratulated him. She proved that the department knew about his racial profiling and encouraged it because it was profitable. The fallout was nuclear. The video of the arrest was leaked to the press, not by Elena, but by a whistleblower within the department who was tired of the corruption. It went viral overnight. "The Iron Lady versus the Racist Badge" was the headline. Protests erupted outside the precinct. The governor, facing an election year, ordered the State Bureau of Investigation to take over. 3 weeks later, Sergeant Rick Miller was arrested. But not just for civil rights violations. The FBI had gotten involved regarding the cash seizures. They charged him with racketeering, deprivation of rights, and falsifying official records. It turned out Miller and 2 other officers in his unit had been pocketing a portion of the seized cash before turning it into evidence. They were stealing from the people they were robbing. Miller was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. He lost his pension, his freedom, and his reputation. His wife divorced him during the trial. The man who had terrorized the highway for 2 decades was now an inmate in the very system he had abused. The city settled with Elena Vance for $3.5 million to avoid a public trial that would have destroyed what was left of the department's image. But Elena didn't keep the money. She used the entire $3.5 million to establish the Vance Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit dedicated specifically to representing victims of police misconduct and challenging unlawful traffic stops. The police chief was forced to resign. The Tactical Interdiction Unit was disbanded. The department was placed under a federal consent decree requiring independent oversight for the next 10 years. Elena Vance returned to her life, but she was different. She no longer drove the Mercedes G-Wagon. She traded it for a sedan, a subtle acknowledgement of the trauma she still carried. She still had nightmares about the cold steel of the handcuffs and the hatred in Miller's eyes. But she had won. She had proven that while the system is broken, it can be beaten if you have the courage and the evidence to fight back. So, what is the lesson here? It's a harsh one. Sergeant Miller thought his badge gave him the power to define reality. He thought he could look at a successful black woman and decide she was a criminal simply because she didn't fit his narrow view of the world. He thought his authority was absolute. But he forgot that authority without integrity is just bullying. He forgot that dignity is not something you can strip away with a search or a pair of handcuffs. And he learned at the cost of his entire life that when you come for the wrong person, especially a person armed with the truth and the law, you might just find yourself on the other side of the bars. This case wasn't just about a traffic stop. It was about the assumption of guilt that follows too many people simply because of who they are. Elena Vance stood up not just for herself, but for every person who had been pulled over, humiliated, and silenced on a dark road by an officer like Rick Miller. She turned her trauma into a shield for others. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what real justice looks like. Always record, always know your rights, and never ever let them convince you that you are less than who you are.
This concludes our analysis. For ongoing access to verified footage, please like and subscribe. Thank you for following Bodycam Incident Reports.